My son-in-law smiled sinisterly. Eat, you foolish old man, this is a special dish. But I immediately realized that something was wrong. This smiling son-in-law hid poison behind the facade of a family dinner. I pretended to swallow, but when he turned around, I switched the plates. You will not believe what happened an hour later. His betrayal will not go unpunished. The consequences will hit them with full force. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. Eat, you foolish old man. It is a special dish, said Thomas with that smile of his that I have never liked, a smile that never quite reached his eyes. I stared at the plate of signature dark bourbon-glazed brisket he had just set in front of me, my absolute favorite. The aroma was practically perfect, dark molasses, smoked peppers, the exact blend of spices I had used my entire life at my restaurant. But there was something else, a note that had no business being there. Subtle, almost impossible to catch. But after 40 years of serving up traditional Southern heritage food, my nose knew every single nuance. What a nice touch, Thomas, I said, lifting my fork. My son-in-law settled into his chair across the table, watching me like a hawk. Lydia, my daughter, sat right next to him, actively avoiding my eyes. That was a red flag too. My little girl, who usually talked a mile a minute during dinner, was sitting there like a pillar of salt. I brought the fork to my mouth. I watched Thomas lean forward, practically holding his breath. The idiot couldn't even hide his anticipation. I let the meat touch my lips. I made a sound of deep appreciation. This is outstanding. Where did you learn to prep it like this? I have my secrets, he replied, his smile stretching wider. Man, the guy really thought I swallowed it literally. When Leticia's phone buzzed and they both snapped their heads to look at the screen, my hand moved faster than it had in years. I swapped the plates. Mine for his. 1, 2, 3 seconds. By the time they looked back, I was cutting a piece of the meat from the plate now sitting in front of me. His original plate. Clean, untampered. Aren't you going to eat, Thomas? I asked, pointing at the plate now resting in front of him. The one he had prepared with such meticulous care. Sure, he said, picking up his fork without a shred of suspicion. I watched him take that first bite. Chew, swallow. He took another, and then another. All the while running his mouth about his grand plans to modernize my restaurant. Fusion cuisine, he called it. Molecular gastronomy. As if 3 decades of Savannah culinary tradition could be improved by turning good food into foam and air. The business needs to evolve. Father-in-law, you know how it is. Younger crowds want something different, right? These old recipes that kept this business alive for 30 years, I finished for him. Yeah, it's a real shame, isn't it? Lydia shot me a warning look, as if I were the problem at the table. Unbelievable. The little girl I raised, the one I taught to bake cornbread from scratch when she was 8 years old, was looking at me like I was a burden. 20 minutes went by. Then 25. I ate slowly, savoring every clean bite of my food. Thomas kept babbling about his grandiose vision, about how the restaurant, the Savannah tradition, would become something truly special under his management. By the way, I said, wiping my mouth with my napkin. Are you feeling all right, Thomas? You look a little pale. There it was, the first sign. His hand drifted down to his stomach, a microscopic flinch. A flash of pure discomfort crossed his face. I am fine, he said, but his voice was tight. 5 minutes later, the facade crumbled. His forehead was slick with sweat. His skin had taken on a sickly greenish tint that contrasted beautifully with the crisp white of his expensive shirt. One of those shirts he definitely bought with money he stole from my business. Probably. Thomas, are you sure you are okay? Lydia asked, finally noticing her husband looked ready to lose his lunch. He pushed back from the table, stumbling to his feet. Sweat was pouring down his face like a waterfall. Brilliant. Just brilliant. Whatever he had laced that glaze with. I just sat there, calmly finishing my coffee, like I was watching a particularly gripping movie, because that is exactly what it was. Pure entertainment. The guy who had just tried to poison me was getting a front row seat to his own medicine. Did something disagree with you, son? I asked, my voice dripping with genuine curiosity. Maybe the brisket had a little something special in it. Our eyes met. I saw the exact second it clicked in his brain. His pupils, blown wide from panic, and whatever toxins were in his system, dilated even further. He knew that I knew. He realized I had swapped the plates. He knew he had just ingested his own poison. Old man, He tried to choke out, but his stomach had a different agenda. He doubled over, clapping a hand over his mouth. At my table, son, you always taste what you serve first, I said, using the exact same calm tone I would use to read off a recipe. My father taught me that. He had plenty of enemies in the restaurant business too. Jealous people, people with no morals. Thomas bolted for the bathroom. I could hear the violent sounds of his agony straight through the closed door. They were not pleasant sounds, but I did not feel a single drop of pity. Lydia jumped up, completely to be torn, running after him and standing there staring at me with a cocktail of horror and confusion. "Dad, what did you do?" I raised an eyebrow. "I didn't do anything, sweetheart. I just ate the delicious dinner your husband cooked." Though it seems his own cooking did not agree with him. Funny how that works, right? I stood up from the table and carefully folded my napkin. So many years in the restaurant business had taught me a lot. Not just about food, but about people. About reading intentions, about sensing when someone is out for your blood. Over the last few weeks, I had been noticing things. Little things. Thomas and Lydia whispering in the kitchen, snapping their mouths shut the second I walked in. Documents vanishing from my home office. A strange chemical smell in my morning coffee a few days back that made me dump it down the sink without taking a sip. Phone calls that ended abruptly when I got close. My own daughter, and this disrespectful punk who had filled her head with garbage. "You should probably go help him," I said, feigning concern. "He looks awful. I will call an ambulance." "No," Thomas screamed from the bathroom, between violent dry heaves. "No, do not call." Of course not, because then he would have to explain exactly what was happening to him, which would lead to toxicology reports, which would lead to some very uncomfortable questions from the police. I walked to my bedroom, the room where I had slept alone ever since my Eleanor passed away 6 years ago. I pulled the door shut, but I did not lock it. I wanted to hear what was happening out there. I wanted to hear my daughter comforting the man who had just tried to murder me. I pulled out my old recipe journal, the one I had kept since I opened the Savannah tradition back in 1995. Yellowed pages packed with handwritten notes, improvements, and culinary secrets I had gathered over 3 decades. Towards the back, there were blank pages. I grabbed a pen and wrote in clear, steady letters. July 15th, 2025, the day my daughter and son-in-law tried to poison me. It was not the first attempt, but it was the most obvious, the clumsiest, the one that confirmed every single suspicion I had been harboring over the last few weeks. I sat in my room listening. Thomas's groans echoed down the hall for over an hour. Lydia kept running in and out of the bathroom with towels and water. At one point, I heard her crying. It is funny how the human mind works when you are betrayed. I wasn't thinking about the pain. I wasn't thinking about the rage. Instead, I found myself replaying memories, specific moments that suddenly took on a completely different, sinister meaning. I remembered the day Lydia brought Thomas home for the first time 3 years ago. It was March, right in the middle of the spring tourist rush, when the restaurant was operating at triple capacity. He walked in with this arrogant smirk, shaking my hand way too hard, the classic move of an insecure man trying to compensate for something. "Mr. Pendleton, I have heard so much about you," he said. "Your restaurant is an absolute legend in this city. A legend. As if 30 years of broken sleep, burned hands, and pure sacrifice could be boiled down to one hollow word." But I smiled. I played nice. He was my daughter's boyfriend. I even cooked up a massive feast that day. The dark brisket, homemade cornbread, collard greens, the works. Everything traditional. Everything authentic. I watched Thomas eat with that critical, evaluating stare that pretentious chefs use when they taste someone else's work. Like he was grading me. "It's good," he had said. And something in his tone grated on my nerves. Good, not excellent, not extraordinary. Good. I should have seen it right then. The arrogance. The snobbery, that typical New York hotshot attitude, rolling down to the South thinking everything local was inferior, thinking tradition meant backward and modern automatically meant better. But Lydia was looking at him with stars in her eyes, and I, like an absolute fool, thought, well, if he makes her happy. Then came the wedding, small, discreet, right in the backyard of this house. The house I built from the ground up in 1985, right around the time Lydia was born. 2 stories, classic colonial wraparound porch, sitting on a prime lot on Bull Street, a massive piece of family history. During the reception, Thomas's father, some pompous corporate executive from up north, leaned over to me and said, "What a cute little house, Arthur, very quaint." As if a $1.2 million property was just a little shack. His mother didn't even bother speaking to me. She spent the entire afternoon complaining under her breath about the Georgia humidity, about how the food was too heavy, about how she missed the city. And Thomas, the beaming groom, kept introducing me to his friends as the father-in-law, the guy with the old-school diner. Using this specific tone that heavily implied old, outdated, a relic, I should have seen it. After the wedding, they moved into my house. Temporarily, they promised. Just until they saved up enough for their own place. Thomas was between jobs. Another massive red flag I chose to ignore. He had walked away from a gig at some high-end fusion spot in Atlanta because the head chef didn't respect his vision. Translation. He got fired for being a nightmare to work with. Months bled into a year. 1 year bled into 2. There was always an excuse. They needed a larger down payment. The housing market was too inflated. They were waiting for the absolute perfect opportunity. Meanwhile, they lived under my roof. They ate my groceries. They used my electricity, my water, my internet. And slowly, Thomas started making comments about the restaurant. The menu needs a total overhaul, father-in-law. The decor is depressing. You really need to consider bringing in a younger chef with fresh concepts. As if the recipes that had kept the lights on for 30 years were suddenly garbage. And Lydia. God, Lydia. My little girl who used to bus tables for me on weekends in high school. The girl who learned to make that dark roux from her mother, Eleanor. The girl who swore up and down that one day she would open her own traditional spot. That Lydia vanished. She was replaced by this hollow version who just nodded along to whatever Thomas preached. A version who looked at me with deep pity whenever he mocked my obsolete methods. She even stopped dropping by the restaurant. 3 months ago, I found a stack of papers in my home office. Documents that had no business being there. Property appraisals. Brochures for assisted living facilities. Pamphlets for nursing homes catering to seniors requiring comprehensive memory care. I was 67 years old, for God's sake, not 90. I was still running the restaurant without missing a beat. I was still down at the Forsyth Farmers Market at dawn picking out produce. I confronted Lydia. She fed me a line about just researching options for the distant future, about being prepared, about just wanting the best for me's. A month ago, my accountant called me, sounding frantic. He told me someone had been poking around, asking heavy questions about the restaurant's financials, about my personal accounts, about whether or not I had an ironclad will. That night, I went digging through Thomas's desk. I found a business plan, the Savannah Fusion Project, a modern vision, financial projections, glossy 3D renders of a completely gutted, modernized dining room, and at the very bottom, a handwritten note. Once the old man is out of the way, the old man. That is what he called me behind closed doors. The old man who took him in, the old man who gave him free rent and hot meals, the old man who was standing in his way. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I laid there in the dark thinking, planning. Because if there is one thing my decades in the cutthroat restaurant business taught me, it is this. When someone is coming to steal from you, you don't sit down and cry, you gear up, you act. 2 weeks later, I hired a private investigator, Harvey Miller. Came highly recommended by another old-school restaurant owner downtown. Professional, ghost quiet, expensive. But he was worth every single penny. I want to know every breath they take, I told him. Everything. And man, did he deliver. Secret meetings with a sleazy lawyer. Conversations about how to fast-track a declaration of incompetence. Visits to banks inquiring about home equity lines of credit. Using my house, my restaurant. They wanted to strip me to the bone. But today, with this pathetic attempt at poisoning me, they crossed the point of no return. This wasn't just corporate theft anymore. It was attempted murder. And that, my dear son-in-law, was a fatal mistake. I pushed myself off the bed. Out in the hallway, the house was dead silent. Thomas had probably passed out from sheer dehydration, or he was just too weak to make a sound. I cracked my door open. Lydia was leaning against the wall, her eyes swollen and red from crying. "How is he?" I asked, putting on my best mask of concern. "Bad. Really bad. Dad, he needs a doctor." "Then call one." He says no. "How strange," I said, brushing past her toward the kitchen. If it was just a normal stomach bug, why on earth would he avoid a doctor? I watched the gears turn in her head. I saw the exact moment a tiny seed of doubt took root in her mind. Small, but it was there. I brewed a pot of dark, strong coffee, exactly how I liked it. I poured a mug and sat at the exact same table where just hours ago my son-in-law had served me poison. The next morning, I played my part flawlessly. Good morning, big smile. Newspaper in one hand, coffee in the other. Thomas finally dragged himself out of his room around 10. Still pale as a ghost, still shaky on his feet. He refused to make eye contact with me. "Good morning, son," I said, putting a little extra weight on that last word. "How are you feeling?" "Better," he mumbled. Glad to hear it. I will be down at the restaurant if you need anything. I drove my truck downtown to the Savannah Tradition, right off Broughton Street. My kingdom, my life's work. The empire I built from nothing. I walked in through the back alley, greeted my prep cooks, and locked myself in my back office. I spun the dial on the wall safe, leases, deeds, my last will and testament. Everything neatly organized. The time for watching was over. It was time to act, but not with screaming matches or flying fists. That is exactly what they expected, an emotional, desperate old man losing his grip. I was going to do this the cold way, the legal, methodical way, using every single weapon the system provides to an established businessman who knows how to play the game. I pulled out my phone and dialed Attorney Gabriel Vance, a shark who specialized in estate law. It was time to trigger that will I wrote 10 years ago, the one with a very specific clause regarding the moral unfitness of heirs. It was time for my beloved daughter and son-in-law to learn a brutal lesson. Down here, where respect still carries weight, you do not bite the hand that feeds you. And if you try to take out the king, you better not miss. Because I wasn't going to miss. For the next few days, I watched them. But not like before, when I was turning a blind eye and praying things would magically fix themselves. No, I was watching with the eyes of a predator who knows exactly where the trap is set, and there was plenty to see. On July 17th, while I was sipping my morning coffee, I watched Thomas obsessively checking his phone. Every new text made him smirk with that smug entitlement that made my blood boil. Lydia hovered over him, refilling his mug, waiting on him hand and foot like he was royalty. Like they weren't freeloading in her father's house for the third year in a row. "Morning," I said, flashing my most harmless grandfatherly smile. Thomas barely glanced up, not even the basic courtesy of a greeting. Charming. The kind of basic respect you teach a 5-year-old? This 38-year-old man had somehow entirely bypassed Dad. Lydia walked over, wearing an expression that desperately tried to look caring. "Did you sleep okay? You looked a little sluggish yesterday." Right, sluggish. Because her husband had tried to slip me a lethal dose of whatever. How incredibly thoughtful. "Never better, sweetheart." Slept like a log. I caught the micro-expression between them. Fast, almost invisible. Thomas, furrowing his brow. Lydia chewing her bottom lip. They expected me to be deteriorating. They probably hoped the residual effects of the poison Thomas had accidentally swallowed himself had somehow magically transferred to me. That morning, after they both left the house, Thomas to God knows where, Lydia to her part-time boutique job downtown, I tossed their bedroom. I am not proud of it, but the stakes were too high for manners. Inside Thomas's closet, I found 3 brand new tailored suits, tags still hanging off the sleeves. One was priced at $1,500, another at $2,000. Imported Italian leather shoes pushing $1,000 a pair. Where the hell was he getting this cash? His last paycheck was over a year ago. Lydia brought home barely $3,000 a month. The math was screaming at me. But I needed more than a bad equation. I needed bulletproof evidence. That afternoon, after the lunch rush cleared out, I called up George Mitchell, a fellow restaurant owner I had known for 15 years. We met up near Forsyth Park. "George, I need a name. Someone ghost quiet, a private investigator." George didn't ask a single question. In our line of work, everyone understands that sometimes you have to protect your house. He slid a napkin across the table with a phone number scribbled on it. "Harvey Miller. He is sharp. Expensive but sharp. He doesn't make rookie mistakes that'll land you in legal trouble." The next day, July 18th, I sat down with Harvey at a quiet diner on the edge of town. He was in his late 40s, close-cropped hair, eyes that scanned the room and missed nothing. Dressed casually, completely forgettable. "Mr. Pendleton," he said, offering a firm handshake. "George spoke highly of you. What are we looking at?" I laid it out for him. Not the whole bloody story, just the operational details. A freeloader son-in-law. Strong suspicions of corporate sabotage and asset theft. The need to document every move, every text, every whispered conversation. "What's the timeline?" he asked, tapping on a tablet. "However long it takes to nail him to the wall." $5,000 retainer, he said. No hesitation. $1,000 a week after that, plus expenses. I deliver hard reports every 3 days. Photos, video, audio logs, wherever legally permissible. It was a chunk of change. But my restaurant was worth $2.5 million. My house, $1.2. If Thomas was planning a hostile takeover, $5,000 was pocket change. "You're hired." That same afternoon, I drove down to the county clerk's office. A miserable gray building, packed with people staring at the clock. I pulled a ticket. I waited 2 hours. When I finally got to the window, I requested certified copies of every single deed, lien, and public record attached to my name, my restaurant, and my home. It's $20 per certified page, the clerk, a tired woman in thick glasses, warned me. I don't care. Print everything registered to Arthur Pendleton. It took another hour, but I walked out holding a thick manila envelope. I sat on a concrete bench in the parking garage and started flipping through the pages. Everything looked perfectly normal. Until I hit the commercial property records for the restaurant. Date: May 15th, 2025, 2 months ago. Commercial home equity line of credit, $800,000. Borrower, Arthur Pendleton. Beneficiary account authorized, Thomas Sterling. My hands started vibrating. Not out of fear, out of pure, white-hot fury. The document bore my signature, a signature that looked terrifyingly identical to mine, but a signature I had absolutely never penned. The dates lined up perfectly with a weekend I had spent pulling double shifts at the restaurant, overseeing a kitchen renovation. Thomas had free rein in my home office the entire time. That son of a bitch had mortgaged my life's work for $800,000. I kept reading. The first repayment installment was due September 15th. Defaulting meant the bank could initiate foreclosure proceedings. 3 missed payments, and the Savannah tradition would be ripped from my hands. Suddenly, the imported suits and the Italian shoes made perfect sense. The smug confidence. The bastard didn't just want to poison me. He had already started bleeding me dry months ago. I pulled out my phone, photographed every single page, shoved the originals under the floor mat of my truck, and drove home. My jaw was locked so tight my teeth ached. I had to focus on my breathing just to keep from driving my truck through the living room wall. When I walked through the front door, Thomas and Lydia were lounging on the sofa. She was curled up against his shoulder, laughing at some garbage reality show on my television. In my house. Afternoon, I grunted, tossing my keys on the entryway table. Hey, Dad, Lydia muttered without looking away from the screen. Thomas didn't even twitch. I walked into the kitchen and poured a glass of ice water. I listened to them laughing, so relaxed, so utterly convinced their master plan was running like clockwork. That night, during dinner, which I cooked naturally, because these two parasites couldn't boil water, I decided to throw a rock at the hornet's nest. Thomas, I said, sliding the bowl of mashed potatoes toward him. How is that project of yours coming along? The new restaurant concept. I watched him physically choke on his food. Lydia's spine went rigid. What project? She asked, her voice an octave too high. That fusion concept you're always pitching to your buddies. I think it's a fascinating idea. Taking classic Southern food and making it modern. The silence that dropped over the table was exquisite. Oh, that. Thomas forcefully cleared his throat. Just brainstorming, Arthur. Nothing concrete. That is a shame, I said, smiling pleasantly. I figured you already had the whole thing mapped out. Location locked down, financing secured. All the heavy lifting, the blood drained from his face. Just a shade, but I saw it. No, not yet. Well, I said, standing up and clearing my plate. Whenever you are ready to launch, let me know. I'd love to see how it plays out. After all, 30 years in the game teaches you a thing or two about what survives in this town and what dies. I walked upstairs without waiting for a response. The second my bedroom door clicked shut, I heard the frantic, hushed voices floating up from the dining room. I couldn't make out the words, but the frequency was unmistakable. Pure panic. Good. Let them sweat. I opened my recipe journal and flipped to the poison entry. Right beneath it, I wrote, July 17th, 2025. Discovered my son-in-law forged my signature to steal $800,000. My own daughter is complicit. I locked the journal in my nightstand. Tomorrow, the real hunt would begin. This wasn't just defense anymore. This was a war of annihilation. And in war, the man who controls the battlefield wins. On July 18th, right at 9 a.m., I knocked on the heavy mahogany doors of attorney Gabriel Vance's office. 3rd floor, prime real estate overlooking the historic district. His secretary, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, immediately offered me coffee. Mr. Pendleton, Gabriel is ready for you. Come on back. Gabriel Vance was 55, silver hair slicked back, wearing a suit that cost more than a used car. I knew him from Chamber of Commerce banquets, but I had never needed a killer until today. Arthur, he said, offering a crushing handshake. Have a seat. Talk to me. I dropped the manila envelope of county records onto his desk. He slipped on his reading glasses and started scanning. His professional, neutral expression slowly morphed into a deep scowl. Did you sign this? He asked, tapping the signature line on the loan agreement. No. Do you have a copy of your current will? Drawn up 10 years ago by Richard Hayes. Gabriel nodded, scribbling furiously on a legal pad. Arthur, what you are showing me is massive wire and bank fraud. And potentially, he paused, looking over the rim of his glasses. Attempted murder. Depending on what else you haven't told me yet. I gave him the rest. The dinner, the switched plates. Thomas sweating out his own toxic glaze. I don't have the physical food, I admitted. No lab tests. But I know exactly what happened. Gabriel leaned back, steepling his fingers. Proving the poison without a toxicology report is tough. But this loan fraud, we can bury him with this. We need a forensic handwriting analysis, a board-certified graphologist. In Georgia, a certified expert's testimony is gospel in a fraud case. How long? If I make the call right now, we have a certified report in 10 to 14 days. Cost? The expert is $5,000. My retainer to take this all the way to the criminal courts is $50,000, $25,000 up front. It was a bargain to save my empire. Done. If the expert confirms the forgery, we bypass civil court and take this straight to the district attorney. Under federal and state law, forging a signature on a commercial loan of this magnitude carries a mandatory minimum. With $800,000 on the line, the judge will throw the book at him. Up to 10 years in a federal penitentiary. 10 years. Thomas would be pushing 50 by the time he saw sunlight again. How fast does the DA move? Once we hand them an airtight package, they'll issue a warrant within weeks. But we can freeze the accounts and put a travel ban on him immediately. Gabriel leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. There is one more thing we need to discuss. Your will, what does it say about your daughter? She is the sole beneficiary. When I die, she gets the keys to the castle. Does it have a disinheritance clause? I racked my brain. When Richard Hayes drafted it, he threw in a bunch of standard legalese, but there was one specific section I had thought was overly paranoid at the time. Something about moral unfitness. Gabriel smiled, a cold, predatory smile. The Slayer statute and severe elder abuse disinheritance laws. If we can prove your daughter was an active accomplice in a felony conspiracy to defraud or harm you, we can trigger that clause. We can sever her rights completely. She gets nothing. Is that bulletproof? Ironclad. It's the nuclear option of estate law, designed specifically to stop greedy kids from bleeding their parents dry. I sat there, letting the reality wash over me. Lydia, my daughter, the kid I taught to ride a bike, the girl I stayed up with when she had a fever, but she was also the woman who sat quietly while her husband tried to feed me a lethal dose of God knows what. What do we need to trigger it? Hard proof of her involvement. We need to prove she knew. I thought about her silence at the dinner table, how she blocked the bathroom door, how she begged me not to call 911. She knew. Of course she knew. I need it on tape, Gabriel said. Texts, audio, witnesses. Anything showing a conspiracy? I hired a private investigator yesterday. Brilliant. Tell him his #1 priority is catching her on tape, acknowledging the plot. Gabriel slid a retainer agreement across the desk. I read every word, signed it, and wrote him a check for $25,000. One last thing, Arthur, Gabriel said as I stood up. You cannot let your son-in-law know we are on to him. If he gets spooked, he shreds the evidence and runs. Play the fool, understood? And Arthur, his voice softened just a fraction. I know this is hell. It is your own flesh and blood. But sometimes family forces us to pull the trigger. I know. Gabriel, believe me, I know. I walked out into the blinding Savannah sun. I sat in my truck for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the pavement. My phone buzzed. It was Harvey, Mr. Pendleton. I have the first drop. Can you meet where? The old diner off Victory Drive. 30 minutes. I got there early, ordered black coffee, and took a booth in the back. Harvey slid in 15 minutes later, dropping a slim manila folder and a flash drive on the table. Your son-in-law is a sloppy amateur, he said, skipping the pleasantries. He booted up his laptop. Yesterday, he took a meeting with a sleazy estate lawyer named Robert Paxton. Guy is known for operating in the gray areas. He pulled up high-res photos. Thomas walking into a strip mall law office. Thomas walking out 40 minutes later. But this is the gold, Harvey said. I bounced a parabolic mic off the window glass. They left it cracked. Perfectly legal intercept, since they had no reasonable expectation of privacy. In a public-facing commercial space, he hit play. The audio was crystal clear. Thomas's voice, I need this, fast track. The old man is more stubborn than I thought. I want the conservatorship paperwork ready to file by the end of the month. A raspy voice. That kind of expedited miracle costs $50,000. Cash for the filings and for my absolute discretion. Thomas's voice again. Fine. The bank credit line will cover it. My wife is fully on board. She knows it's her inheritance anyway. She has every right to protect her assets from a senile old fool who's running the business into the ground. My blood turned to ice. My daughter wasn't just aware. She was the co-signer of my destruction. Keep listening, Harvey said, tapping the spacebar. Thomas's voice. If he fights it, he loses. By August 28th, I'm taking him in for a comprehensive medical evaluation. The doctor I bought off is going to officially diagnose him with advanced dementia. Once that medical report hits the judge's desk alongside the power of attorney, the house and the restaurant are ours before September. The recording clicked off. Where was Lydia during this? I asked, my voice terrifyingly calm. Waiting in the car, Harvey clicked to the next photo. Look at this. The photo showed Thomas getting into the passenger seat. Lydia was behind the wheel. She leaned over and kissed him. They looked thrilled. Absolutely euphoric. I slid another $1,000 in cash across the table. Keep digging, I want it all. I drove straight to the restaurant, locked myself in the office, pulled out my journal. I drew a line down the middle of a blank page. Their plan. Poison me, failed. Frame me as incompetent, in progress. Forge power of attorney. Liquidate my life's work. Lock me in a memory care ward, my plan. Forensic handwriting analysis. Audio proof of felony conspiracy. Criminal indictments. Trigger the Slayer statute. Annihilate them. I poured myself a neat glass of top-shelf bourbon. I drank it slow, letting the burn anchor me to reality. That night, I put on an Oscar-worthy performance. I stumbled into the living room, looking bewildered. Where did I put my keys? I muttered loudly. I always leave them right here. Or was it by the sink? They are in your hand, Dad, Lydia said, and her tone wasn't worried. It was eager. Oh. I stared at my own hand like it belonged to a stranger. How strange, I've been so forgetful lately. I caught their reflection in the TV screen. Thomas was grinning. Lydia's eyes were practically shining with excitement. They bought it hook, line, and sinker. They really thought I was losing my mind. I went upstairs and wrote in my journal. July 18th. The theater has opened. They think my brain is rotting. Excellent. In 2 weeks, I will have the forgery report. In 3, enough audio to bury them. By the time September rolls around, they will be walking into a slaughterhouse. On July 28th, Gabriel called, "Get to my office. We have the forensic report." I walked in, and Gabriel slapped a thick binder onto the desk. "You are going to love this." It was a 20-page technical breakdown. Vector graphs, pen pressure heat maps, stroke velocity analysis. "Give it to me in English, Gabriel. The signature is a complete, undeniable forgery," he said, grinning like a shark. "The board-certified graphologist confirmed 17 critical deviations from your established baseline. Thomas's pen pressure is completely wrong. He faked your signature, and he did a mathematically terrible job of it. What's next?" I walk this into the DA's office tomorrow morning. Commercial bank fraud, wire fraud, identity theft. The prosecutor is going to salivate over this. "But Arthur, you cannot breathe a word of this. You have to keep playing the senile old man." "Don't worry," I said. "I'm having the time of my life." On August 10th, Harvey called an emergency meeting. We met at a coffee shop way out in the suburbs. "I got the Holy Grail," Harvey said, sliding a pair of headphones across the table. I planted a legal bug in his car, justified under the felony investigation loophole. "Listen to this." I put the headphones on. Thomas's voice crystal clear over the hum of the car engine. 2 more weeks. We drag him to the clinic. He signs the power of attorney Paxton drafted, and it's game over. Lydia's voice, shaky but resolute. "Are you sure this doctor will do it?" 50 grand is a lot of money. Thomas's voice. "He's guaranteed to stamp an advanced senile dementia diagnosis. Once that hits the record, we sell the assets out from under him before he even realizes what day it is. Then we ship him to that Shady Pines facility out in the county. It's 5 grand a month. We use the restaurant cash to prepay 2 years, and we walk away with nearly $2.5 million free and clear." Silence on the tape. Then Lydia spoke. 2.5 million. Exactly. "Lydia, we're talking about our real life. Paris. Traveling. Opening a massive, modern restaurant in Atlanta. Don't you want that?" A long, agonizing pause. My heart stopped beating. Yes, I want it. Then it's settled. August 28th, we take him to the clinic. By September 1st, we own everything. I ripped the headphones off. My hands were shaking so violently I had to press them flat against the table. The rage was absolute. Pure, distilled, radioactive anger. "Is this admissible?" I choked out. 100%, Harvey said. "Date and time stamped. Digitally encrypted. No judge on earth is throwing that out. Make 3 copies." That night I stood by my bedroom window, staring out at the Savannah skyline. The city where I built my life. The city where my only child was plotting to erase me. I opened the journal. August 10th, 2025. I heard my daughter say, "Yes, I want it." She sold my life for a restaurant in Atlanta. The pain is unbearable, but the hesitation is gone. You chose your path, Lydia. The next morning, Thomas ambushed me in the kitchen. "Arthur, remember that full medical checkup we talked about? I got you an appointment, August 28th at the Valley Medical Center." I played the confused old man. "August 28th, that's soon? It's important. Arthur, at your age, you have to stay sharp." "Thank you, son," I said. The word tasted like battery acid on my tongue. He walked away, practically glowing with victory, drove straight to Gabriel's office, and dropped the USB drive on his desk. He listened to the whole thing with his eyes closed. When it finished, he took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Arthur, this is a textbook confession to felony conspiracy, fraud, and attempted kidnapping. They are openly plotting to lock you in a facility against your will. The DA is going to fast-track this to a grand jury immediately. When do they arrest him? We could do it tomorrow. But if you want to make it airtight, we wait until August 28th. Let him physically bring you to the fraudulent clinic. Let him present the forged power of attorney to the corrupt doctor. We catch him dead to rights in the middle of committing the felony. The police will be waiting in the lobby." I smiled. A real smile this time. Let's do it. On August 20th, I met with Richard Hayes, my estate attorney. I laid out the entire conspiracy, the audio, the forgery report, the DA's plan. Richard, a man who had known my late wife, looked physically sick. "Your own daughter, Arthur. I am so incredibly sorry." "Don't be sorry. Richard, be ruthless. I need to trigger the Slayer statute. I need her cut out completely." We spent 6 hours drafting an impenetrable fortress of legal documents. The Savannah tradition, value $2.5 million. Sole beneficiary, Edward Pendleton, my nephew. The Bull Street house, value $1.2 million. 60% to Edward, 40% to the Georgia Senior Heritage Foundation. Bank accounts, investments, liquid assets. Edward Pendleton, Lydia Sterling, $0. 0 cents. Reason: activation of the moral unfitness clause due to documented felony conspiracy, fraud, and elder abuse. "To make this truly bulletproof," Richard said, sliding another stack of papers over, "we are placing the restaurant into an irrevocable trust. You are the lifetime beneficiary. The bank is the trustee. This means even if Thomas somehow managed to forge a power of attorney, he legally cannot touch the restaurant. It's locked in a vault he can't open." I signed the papers. Every stroke of the pen felt like closing a heavy iron door. I was erasing my daughter from my legacy. On August 25th, 3 days before the sting, Thomas made his dumbest move yet. He walked into my study holding a clipboard, faux concerned smile plastered on his face. "Arthur, the clinic needs you to sign these pre-intake forms for the checkup." "Sure thing, son." I put on my reading glasses. I read the first page. Standard medical history, second page. Standard liability waiver, the third page. There it was. Buried in a dense block of medical jargon was a legal landmine. The undersigned hereby grants full general power of attorney, including asset liquidation and financial administration, to Thomas Sterling. He was trying to trick me into signing away my empire on a medical clipboard. I looked up. Thomas was sweating, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Thomas," I said, my voice dropping the confused old man routine entirely. "Do you honestly think I am this stupid?" His smile shattered. "What?" Page 3, paragraph 5, general power of attorney. "Did you really think I wouldn't read it?" I watched the blood violently drain from his face. He looked like a man who just stepped on a landmine and heard the click. That must be a typo from the hospital's standard forms." "Thomas." I cut him off, and the sheer authority in my voice pinned him to the floor. "I am 67 years old. I have signed thousands of commercial contracts in my life. Did you really think you could slip a financial death warrant past me disguised as a cholesterol check?" He opened his mouth, closed it, and stood there gasping like a fish on a dock. "I am not signing this," I said, tossing the clipboard onto the desk. "I don't know what kind of game you are playing, Thomas, but let me make this crystal clear. This is my house. This is my money. This is my life. And nobody, do you hear me? Nobody is going to take what I built." For the first time in 3 years, Thomas looked at me with genuine, unfiltered terror. He grabbed the clipboard and practically ran out of the room. I pulled out my phone and texted Gabriel. "He just tried to slip me a hidden POA. He knows the jig is up. Thursday is going to be explosive." Gabriel replied instantly. The DA added attempted fraud to the pile. "The trap snaps shut at 9 a.m. Thursday. The police are ready." August 28th was a beautiful cloudless Savannah morning. Thomas walked into the kitchen at 7 a.m., twitchy and nervous. "Ready for the clinic, Arthur?" "Ready as I'll ever be." I wore my best suit. If I was going to watch my son-in-law get hauled off in chains, I was going to look sharp doing it. We drove in silence. Thomas kept checking his rear-view mirror. Lydia sat in the passenger seat, chewing her nails. We pulled up to the Valley Medical Center, a nondescript brick building in a strip mall. The perfect place for shady backdoor medicine. "Let me help you, Dad," Lydia said as we got out. "I can walk just fine," I snapped, striding toward the glass doors. Thomas was smiling again. He thought he was walking into the end zone. But when the automatic sliding doors opened, there wasn't a receptionist waiting for us. There were two plainclothes detectives from the State Bureau of Investigation, badges out, sidearms visible. And standing right behind them was Gabriel Vance, holding a thick leather briefcase. Thomas froze. "What is Thomas Sterling?" the lead detective said, stepping forward. "You are under arrest for commercial bank fraud, felony forgery, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse." The handcuffs came out. Click, click. Thomas's knees gave out. The detectives had to haul him up by his armpits. "There's a mistake." "I didn't do anything." "No mistake," Gabriel said, stepping forward. "We have the forensic graphologist report proving you forged Arthur's signature. Secure an $800,000 line of credit." Thomas whipped his head around to look at me. Absolute panic radiating from his eyes. You set me up." "I defended myself," I said, stepping right into his personal space. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice you stealing nearly $1 million from my company?" Lydia let out a piercing, hysterical scream. "Dad, this is a lie. Thomas would never..." "Never what, Lydia?" I barked, pulling my phone out. "Forge my signature? Here's the forensic report." I shoved the screen in her face. "Or maybe you mean he'd never bribe a doctor 50 grand to lock me in a psych ward? He'd never try to sell my house to fund your little Atlanta fantasy?" Thomas was hyperventilating, struggling against the cuffs. "Arthur, please. I can pay the money back. I swear to God." "With what money, Thomas? The 80 grand you dropped on that BMW? Or the 50 grand in jewelry you bought for your little side piece up in Buckhead?" Lydia stopped screaming. She stared at me, all the color draining from her face. "What jewelry? What side piece? Oh, he didn't tell you?" I pulled up the photos Harvey had taken. Thomas and a blonde 20-something, walking out of a high-end steakhouse. Thomas clasping a diamond necklace around her neck. Meet Chloe, 26 years old. Thomas has been paying the rent on her luxury apartment with the money he stole from me. Lydia looked at the photos. Then she looked at Thomas. She dropped her purse. She backed away from him like he was infected with the plague. You lied to me," she whispered. "It's a setup," Thomas screamed, thrashing against the cops. "He faked those photos." "Then I guess I faked this tape too," I said, hitting play on the audio file. Thomas's voice echoed through the lobby. "The doctor is guaranteed to stamp an advanced senile dementia diagnosis. We ship him to that facility, we walk away with nearly $2.5 million. Then Lydia's voice. "Yes, I want it." The silence that followed was suffocating. Lydia looked at me, tears streaming down her face, her makeup ruined. "Dad, you were spying on us. You were planning to destroy me," I said, my voice colder than ice. "I just survived you." The detectives dragged Thomas out the doors. "You have the right to remain silent." Thomas looked back at me one last time as they shoved him into the back of the cruiser. "Arthur, please." "I can't go to prison. I'm 38. "You should have thought about that before you tried to put me in a cage," I said. The cruiser sped off. Lydia collapsed onto the curb, sobbing into her hands. Gabriel walked up next to me. "Bail will be set at $1 million minimum. He's not getting out. We're looking at 5 to 10 years in federal lockup." I looked down at my daughter crying on the concrete. "Go home, Lydia," I said, "or go wherever you want. But my house is no longer yours." I walked to Gabriel's car and got in. I didn't look back. 2 days later, Lydia showed up at my front door, eyes swollen shut, voice hoarse. "Dad, please, let me in, just 5 minutes." I opened the door. We sat in the living room, the exact spot where Thomas had asked for her hand in marriage. "Dad, you have to drop the charges," she pleaded, twisting her hands together. "Thomas is going to lose everything. His career, his life. He stole $1 million from me, Lydia. He tried to lock me in an asylum. And you want me to let him walk? He made a mistake. He just wanted to secure our future. He bought his mistress diamonds with my money. I fired back. He was going to dump you the second he liquidated my assets. Wake up, Lydia." She flinched like I had slapped her. What about me, Dad? I don't have a home? I don't have anything. You are 35 years old. Get a job. Rent an apartment. Grow up. But my inheritance. I walked into my study, grabbed a copy of the new trust documents, and tossed them on the coffee table. She read through them, her eyes widened in absolute horror. The restaurant goes to Edward. The house goes to charity. I get nothing? Dad, you can't do this. I am your daughter. You stopped being my daughter the second you said yes. I want it on that tape. You agreed to lock me away so you could buy a restaurant in Atlanta. I didn't know he was going to take it that far. She sobbed. You knew enough. I stood up, signaling the conversation was over. I am protecting what I built from the people who tried to steal it, even if one of those people is you. She ran out of the house, slamming the door so hard the framed photos on the wall rattled. I sat alone in the silence. I had won, my empire was safe, my enemy was in a cage, but the victory tasted like ash. A month later, Thomas's hotshot defense lawyer tried to offer a plea deal. They wanted me to drop the charges in exchange for returning the money. I laughed him out of the room. Then they tried to claim I had psychologically manipulated Thomas. Gabriel crushed that defense with a mountain of audio logs, bank transfers, and the forensic report. Cornered, broke, and facing a decade in federal prison, Thomas finally broke. He took a plea deal. October 28th, the sentencing hearing. Thomas stood before the judge in an orange jumpsuit. He looked hollowed out, destroyed, for the charges of commercial fraud, felony forgery, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. The judge's voice boomed through the courtroom. I sentence you to 6 years in a federal penitentiary, with no possibility of parole for a minimum of 4 years. The gavel slammed down. Thomas slumped forward. As the bailiffs dragged him away, he locked eyes with me. You ruined my life, you old bastard, he spat. I stood up. The courtroom went dead silent. No, Thomas, I said, my voice echoing off the wood paneling. You ruined your own life the second you decided to poison the man who put a roof over your head. You ruined it when you forged my name. I didn't ruin you, I just shoved you. He looked away. They hauled him through the heavy wooden doors. That was the last time I ever saw him. 2 weeks later, I threw a massive party at the Savannah Tradition. I closed the doors to the public and invited the entire staff, cooks, waiters, dishwashers, everyone who had bled for this place. I stood at the head of the main dining table and pulled out the legal trust documents. This restaurant has been my life for 30 years. I announced to the room. I built it with my own 2 hands. And now it is time to pass the torch to someone who actually respects the tradition. Someone who knows the value of hard work over easy money. I handed the folder to my nephew, Edward Pendleton. As of today, you are the legal owner and operator of this restaurant? Edward stared at the papers, tears welling up in his eyes. Uncle Arthur, I don't know if I'm worthy. You proved a hell of a lot more worthy than my own blood, I said, pulling him into a hug. The staff erupted into cheers. As the party raged on, I looked toward the front windows. Standing out on the sidewalk, illuminated by the street lamps, was Lydia. She looked exhausted, beaten down. She was working for minimum wage at a diner across town now, living in a cramped 1-bedroom apartment. She didn't try to come in. She just pressed a piece of paper against the glass. Written in thick black marker were the words, "I'm sorry, Dad. I love you." I stared at her, the girl who betrayed me, the girl who lost everything. I walked over to the hostess stand, grabbed a marker, and wrote on the back of a menu. I pressed it against the glass. "Forgiveness is earned with actions, not words." She read it. She nodded slowly, the tears reflecting the neon lights of the restaurant sign. She turned and walked away, disappearing into the humid Savannah night. "Will you ever forgive her, Uncle?" Edward asked, coming up beside me. "I don't know, son," I admitted. "Maybe. If she proves she's actually changed. But forgiveness isn't free." I walked back into the warmth of my restaurant, surrounded by people who respected me. Secure in the empire I had fought a war to protect. That night, sitting alone in my house, I opened my recipe journal one last time. October 28th, 2025. Thomas is in federal prison. Edward owns the restaurant. Lydia came to apologize, but she isn't ready for forgiveness yet. The tradition survives, and I am still standing. I closed the book. Protecting your legacy isn't always a clean fight. Sometimes it costs you the people you love the most. Sometimes justice leaves a bitter taste in your mouth. But keeping your dignity, surviving the wolves in your own house, that is always worth the price. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts about this story in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the video on the left. Thanks for watching. Yeah,